right, let's begin. We are looking at the biblical covenants. We're doing a whole series on end times, on eschatology. And the point we made last time was the reason we need to understand the covenants is because they set the storyline of the Bible. That in order to understand what's going on in the end times, you have to understand everything that's come before it. It's like trying to figure out, okay, in the Star Wars movies or in the whatever sequel movies that you're watching, trying to understand the context without understanding the things that came before. So we looked last time at the context of end times. We looked at two kinds of ancient Near Eastern covenants. We looked at unconditional and conditional. Unconditional means essentially what? Somebody summarize that for me.
Just God makes a promise.
God makes a promise, a covenant, yes, to us. And conditional then is God covenants that if you, he will. So the unconditional covenant is God saying, I will do this for you. The conditional is God saying, if you do this, I will do this for you. So Roy Beecham summarizes the parameters of covenants. No covenant exists apart from the naming of parties, in other words, who's involved, the formal establishment of relationship between those parties, I am your God, you are my people, and the creation of legal obligations that bind those parties in that relationship. I will do this, you will do that, okay? So we looked last time at the Noahic covenant. This is the covenant made with whom? Don't overthink it. Yeah, see, a bunch of people laugh, but nobody actually answers the question. Noah, okay. And so we looked at the Noahic covenant. God will not flood the earth again. And then we're going to skip ahead to the Abrahamic covenant, God's choosing of Israel, specifically God's choosing of the line through Abraham. And he promises him several things. And what did he call it? I will make with you a what covenant? Starts with an E and goes on a really long time. Everlasting covenant, okay? And he promised him three things. He promised him land, the land of Canaan, descendants, the people of Israel, and spiritual blessings that will bless the world, the promised seed of the woman from Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, right? I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise you on the head, and you shall bruise him on the heel. Now, as we talked last time, who is the ultimate seed of the woman that Paul identifies in Galatians chapter 3? Jesus. That is the one through whom the people of Israel would ultimately bless the whole world. All right, so today we are beginning with the Mosaic covenant. The Mosaic covenant. This is God's ruling of Israel. God's ruling of Israel. So let's begin by looking at Exodus chapter 6. What major event has just happened? 2 years now, almost 2 years ago, we went through the first half of the book of Exodus on Sunday mornings. What major event happens at this point?
Slavery.
They're being taken out of slavery, right? So God has talked to Moses in the wilderness. He has called him to Pharaoh, and now he's getting ready to set up this covenant. So he starts in Exodus 6. So Moses has not gone to Pharaoh, or Pharaoh has not let the people go yet. But God spoke further to Moses and said to him, I am the Lord, and I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as God Almighty, but by my name, Lord, I did not make myself known to them. Now, if you notice again, when it's all capitals, Lord, what is actually the word behind it? Yahweh. See, the word in Hebrew for Lord, just Lord, sovereign, is Adonai. But in respect for that name, they would translate it as Lord, rather than say the holy name of God. But it's actually what we call Yahweh, right? Or in Latin would be Jehovah. I did not make myself known to them. In other words, he said, I called myself by Elohim, God, to them, but they didn't have the type of relationship with me that I'm going to have with you now. So he's doing something new here. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land in which they sojourned. Furthermore, I have heard the groaning of the sons of Israel. And Israel, they're called the sons of Israel because they're the sons of who? Jacob, who God changed his name to Israel, which means strives with God, okay? Because the Egyptians are holding them in bondage, and I have remembered my covenant. Say therefore to the sons of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burden of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from their bondage. I will also redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments. Then I will take you for my people, and I will be your God. And you shall know that I am the Lord your God, or I am Yahweh, your Elohim, who brought you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will bring you to the land which I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to you for a possession. I am the Lord. I am Yahweh. I am the one who is. In other words, I don't change. And this is going to become a very important point when you get to the prophets later. Over and over. Why does God, in spite of Israel's unfaithfulness, not just go, you're done, and wipe them off the face of the planet? Why? Because he made that covenant, and as surely as he does not change, that covenant will not change. That's what he says over and over. He says, not for your sake am I going to do this, but for the sake of my name, for my faithfulness' sake, I'm going to keep what I've promised to you. Okay? So then, excuse me, Exodus chapter 20, then God spoke all these words. What has happened now? Israel has come out of Egypt by the, what was the main thing God used to get them out of Egypt? The 10 plagues, right? God has taken them out of Egypt because of the 10 plagues. He's taken them through the Red Sea. He has taken them now to Mount Sinai. This is where he's making the Mosaic covenant. Then God spoke all these words saying, I am the Lord your God. Notice how many times he starts a covenant with, I am Yahweh. I am Yahweh, your Elohim. I am the Lord, not a Lord. I am not a Yahweh. I am the Lord. And then he makes it personal, your Elohim, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol or any likeness of what is in heaven above or on the earth or in the water under the earth. You shall not worship them or serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children on the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing loving kindness to thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not leave him unpunished who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male or your female servant, or your cattle or your sojourner who stays with you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and mother, that your days may be prolonged in the land which the Lord your God gives you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife or his male servant or his female servant or his ox or his donkey or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Now this list of rules, what do we call them? The 10 Commandments. What is the context of these commandments? This is a very important point. Did they not know that, say, murder is wrong before God gave them the 10 Commandments? Where they're like, oh, we shouldn't have been killing people. Oh, got it, right. Did they think that stealing was perfectly fine before then? No. You don't get morality from the 10 Commandments. Morality was already a thing before that. God is codifying certain moral commands as part of the stipulations of this covenant. He's going, you want to be my covenant people? Here's what I'm holding you to, okay? Now, what was the context of this? What had happened just before? God, after bringing the people of the 12 sons of Jacob, Abraham's grandson, also named Israel, out of slavery in Egypt, made a conditional covenant, a suzerain vassal covenant, with them to form a theocratic nation that, if kept, would result in blessing, and if disobeyed, would result in curses and removal from the land. As a conditional covenant, both parties had to agree to the terms, and that's exactly what we find in the chapter before. God, remember with Abraham, God says, I'm going to do this, and he just does it to Abraham. Here, Israel agrees to the covenant. So we have in Exodus 19, Moses went up to God, and the Lord, and this is on Mount Sinai, and the Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, "Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob and tell the sons of Israel, you yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now then, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be my own possession among the peoples. For all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the sons of Israel." So Moses came and called the elders of the people and set before them all these words which the Lord had commanded him. All the people answered together and said, "All that the Lord has spoken, we will do." And Moses brought back the words of the people to the Lord. So here we see this conditional covenant here. God says, if you do this, I will do this. And the people said, what? We will do these things. They agreed to the terms of the covenant, and they kept it throughout Israel's history, right? Right? He would bring them into the land promised to Abraham, give them laws to govern them, and frankly, throughout Exodus, throughout Numbers, throughout Leviticus, throughout Deuteronomy, we're going to find 613 commandments that they're responsible for as part of this covenant. The 10 commandments are like the preamble to the Constitution of Israel. They're like the beginning point. This is the basic summary of the covenant. Everything else is details on how you go about doing that, okay? So then the entire Old Testament is a playing out of this covenant as the people disobeyed, were captured, repented, restored, disobeyed, and the cycle continues. This law, however, was not meant to govern the Gentile nations. This was a law for the Jewish people in order to enjoy the blessings of the Jewish covenant. So it governed Israel as a nation and those in the land. There are those in our who are among our Reformed friends, for example, who want to essentially argue that this covenant is a universal covenant for all peoples. And so they equate the 10 commandments with God's moral law. But what did we just show? There was a moral law in existence before the 10 commandments were ever a thing, right? Because God is a moral God, we are made in his image, therefore we have moral responsibility. This was a particular codified form, an application of God's moral law for Israel. These laws, were not a means of salvation, and they were not synonymous with God's moral standard. Rather, the law was a national constitution for the nation of Israel, a particular expression of God's righteousness for a theocratic nation. Theocratic means what? God governs, right? For the theocratic nation of Israel. Going to the book of Romans, chapter 2, verse 14. For when the Gentiles, who do not have the law, speaking of the 10 commandments, do instinctively the things of the law, these, not having the law, are a law to themselves, in that they show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience bearing witness, and their thoughts alternately accusing or else defending them on the day when, according to my gospel, God will judge the secrets of men through Jesus Christ. So he starts, again, by pointing off, there's a law that goes beyond the Old Testament law. There is a moral law that is written on the hearts of every individual person because we are image bearers of God. And so even though the Gentiles didn't have the 10 commandments, they didn't have the moral law, they still had a moral accountability because they knew, don't murder. They didn't need the 10 commandments to tell them not to murder. They had it written on their hearts. But then he says, but if you bear the name Jew and rely upon the law and boast in God and know his will and approve the things that are essential, being instructed out of the law, and are confident that you yourself are a guide to the blind, a light to those who are in darkness, a corrector of the foolish, a teacher of the immature, having in the law the embodiment of knowledge and of the truth, you therefore, who teach another, do you not teach yourself? You have the law and you're trusting in the law, but you're not doing the law, right? You who say that one should not commit adultery, do you commit adultery? You who abhor idols, do you rob temples? You who boast in the law through your breaking of the law, do you dishonor God? The name of God is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you, just as it is written. So then he goes through and he's making the point that even if the law was a means of salvation, you're not keeping it anyway, right? So then the law of Moses contained laws for civil and religious life. However, some would like to divide the law into explicitly moral, civil, or religious laws. The text itself doesn't do that. Rather, it blends them all together. And on the contrary, Deuteronomy, in explaining the Ten Commandments, used civil laws as examples of how those moral things were to be lived, and argued that disobeying these civil requirements was to obey the moral requirements. So Douglas Moo says it this way. He's a theologian. It is part of a covenant document entered into with speaking of the Ten Commandments, part of a covenant document entered into with the nation of Israel, and is therefore specifically addressed to Israel. Now, does that mean we learn nothing from the Ten Commandments? Well, no, not at all. We do see God's nature, we see God's character, we see principles that we should learn from and walk in. But that's not because we get these things from the Ten Commandments. It's because of who God is, right? So this is the Mosaic covenant. If you do this, if you keep my commandments, if you keep my law, I will bless you. Notice, salvation is never tied to the Mosaic covenant. Salvation is never tied to the Mosaic covenant. Covenant blessings are tied to the Mosaic covenant. Enjoying the land is tied to the Mosaic covenant. Having the blessing of God is tied to the Mosaic covenant, not individual personal salvation, which has never been by works. Okay? And as we said before, Israel, of course, kept this law perfectly throughout its history. Jeremiah chapter 11. This is right before or as Babylon is coming to take over Israel because of their disobedience. Israel and Judah, they have turned back to the iniquities of their ancestors, who refused to hear my words, and they have gone after other gods to serve them. The house of Israel and the house of Judah have broken my covenant, which I made with their fathers. Therefore, thus says the Lord, behold, I am bringing disaster on them, which they will not be able to escape, though they will cry to me. Yet I will not listen to them. Then the cities of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem will go and cry to the gods to whom they burn incense, but they surely will not save them in the time of their disaster. For your gods are as many as your cities, O Judah. In other words, you have as many gods as you have cities. You can't throw a stick without hitting one of your gods. And as many as the streets of Jerusalem are the altars you have set up to this shameful thing, altars to burn incense to Baal. Therefore, do not pray for this people, nor lift up a cry or prayer for them, for I will not listen when they call to me because of their disaster. What right has my beloved in my house when she has done many vile deeds? Can the sacrificial flesh take away from you your disaster so that you can rejoice? The Lord called your name, a green olive tree, beautiful in fruit and form. With the noise of a great tumult, he has kindled fire on it, and its branches are worthless. The Lord of hosts, who planted you, has pronounced evil against you because of the evil of the house of Israel and of the house of Judah, which they have done to provoke me by offering up sacrifices to Baal. In our culture today, we don't tend to truly feel the weight of idolatry. We live in a very pluralistic religious culture. And so we tend to think, well, they worship their God, we worship our God, what's the big deal? There's two things. Number one, idolatry worships imaginary and created things as if it spoke atoms into existence. And it robs the God who alone is worthy of glory of the praise due him. So all idolatry is evil in itself. If that's all it did, it would be worthy of judgment. But one thing you have to also remember is in our culture, people who have different religious viewpoints, what it tends to amount to in our culture is they just go to a different kind of church. Like that's the extent of it. The worship of Baal was so evil and so heinous that the things they did in worship of Baal were disgusting, such that I won't even name all of them. It goes beyond simply setting up idols to actual evil, disgusting deeds done to children, done to each other. This is what happens when you say, we're going to do the opposite of who God is and build a culture on that. That's what the worship of Baal was. So this is not just, oh, they have a different God. That would be worthy of this in and of itself. But because of the God they worship, they did evil, heinous things, child sacrifice, all kinds of things in worship of this deity. So they rejected God's legal requirements, committed idolatry, which was adultery, and rejected Jesus as king in the Gospels ultimately. But Jesus, in his life and death, fulfilled the requirements of the law and has made it obsolete, no longer in force. This is what we're going to see in the New Testament. Matthew chapter 5, verse 17, Jesus says, "Do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to" what? "Fulfill. Truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or stroke shall pass from the law until all is accomplished." What does he mean by that? His mission was not to go, you don't have to worry about the Old Testament. It was, I'm going to fulfill the Old Testament. I'm going to be the true Israelite who actually kept the law. I'm going to do what Israel never did, and frankly, what Israel never could. I'm going to keep the requirements of the covenant in your place. He fulfilled all of it. And as a result then, when he died, his righteousness is credited because Jesus kept the law in their place. That his law keeping is credited to them. So Romans chapter 10, verse 4, for Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone who believes. Now, the end there is not the idea, the end of there's no point to a law anymore. It is the idea of the end, the purpose of the law. The word behind this is teleos, the purpose, the intention of the law. Christ is the point of the law for righteousness to everyone who believes. So then, where does this leave people who did not keep the old covenant? If the old covenant is obsolete, where does that leave the Jewish people to whom God made these promises? Hebrews chapter 8:13 will set it up for us. When he said a new covenant, he made the first obsolete, but whatever is becoming obsolete and growing old is ready to disappear. What we're going to find, we're going to do one more covenant today, and then we'll actually spend all the next week on what we call the new covenant. What we're going to find is Jeremiah spent all of this time telling them, you have blown it. And now God's going to give you the judgment that he said he was going to give you in Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Leviticus. But not for your sake, but for the sake of my name, declares the Lord in Jeremiah 31 and Ezekiel 36. I will make a new covenant, he says, with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. And the difference is they're going to keep this covenant this time. How? Ultimately, if I can give a little bit away, because they will finally believe the gospel and be saved. They will keep the covenant, but it's future, okay? All right, questions on the Mosaic covenant. Questions on the Mosaic covenant.
The view that you were discussing there a little bit about kind of a misinterpretation or an interpretation of the moral law and the Mosaic law, is that only common with post millennial, or is it also do other different views?
Yeah.
Well?
So post-millennialism, the view that there's a millennial kingdom of sorts and that Jesus comes at the end. No, it's common among basically all Reformed circles. And that's going to include amillennialism, that's going to include post-millennialism. It's also going to include a lot of views like the Catholic view and the Greek Orthodox view and the Lutheran view because they don't draw a distinction between Israel and the church like we're going to do. They essentially think the promises of the Old Testament, Israel has permanently forfeited them, and instead they are applied only spiritually to the church. And so they then reinterpret all of this as the covenant that should, in a sense, govern today. And that's what we call theonomy, is when they try to say, for example, the United States should be run under the Old Testament law. What they're doing is they're trying to say, anybody who keeps the Old Testament law becomes God's chosen people. That's not what God said, right? Yes, the United States should keep a moral law that is rooted in who God is and all of those things. But that's not the same thing as saying, if we were to then start keeping the Old Testament covenant, then God would make us his new chosen people, and we can create a theonomic, theocratic society here today. I'm all for, hey, let's have laws that honor God. Absolutely. Yes and amen. But that's different than saying, if we keep the covenant, we'll get the blessings of the covenant. Very different. Other questions? I kind of expounded a little bit more than the intention of your question, but you gave me a good springboard. Yes?
So do they believe that the Mosaic covenant replaced the Abrahamic covenant?
No, they believe it's an extension of it. So the Abrahamic covenant is the promise that you're going to get these things. The Mosaic covenant is how you're going to get these things.
But they turn both of them into spiritual applications.
Yeah, so ultimately what they believe is that it's two sides of the law gospel coin. So Abraham's covenant is gospel. It is the good news because it's unconditional. It's to us. It is simply good news preached that God is going to do these things. And it is the first instance of the gospel, okay? Then the Mosaic covenant is the outworking of this covenant God made with Adam to keep it, this covenant of works he made with Adam. He blew it, and now we're called to live under that covenant until redemption. Yeah. Yes.
In Galatians, Paul says the law didn't take away the covenant with Abraham. It was like putting people under slavery until the promised one would come, and the law had an end.
Yep.
And it's like when you it was when we were children. When we became children, you put away. It's so interesting. All the religions try to keep that.
They try to keep going back to it.
That dispensation that ended. It
Right.
actually ended.
Yes.
And that's the one they try to keep.
Yep. The point that Paul makes in Galatians 3 and 4 is that the law was never meant to be something that governs your whole life. It was like a tutor pointing you to something bigger. Trying to remain under the Old Testament law would be like saying, well, I really liked Mary's kindergarten class. I think I'm going to stay there indefinitely. No, it wasn't meant to be the place you stay. Okay, it was meant to be something that you learn what you need to learn. And what is that point that Romans 3:20 is going to make? For by the law comes what? The knowledge of sin. The point was not to make you righteous. The point was to show you you're not, right? Any other questions on the Mosaic covenant? Okay. We're going to talk about the Davidic covenant here. The Davidic covenant. We'll see if we get through this. I don't think we're even going to get through this, and that's okay. Excuse me. The Davidic covenant, this is God's promise of a future eternal king. So he comes to King David and says, now it came about when the king lived in his house. David had built a nice new palace for himself, and the Lord had given him rest on every side from all his enemies, that the king said to Nathan the prophet, see now, I dwell in a house of cedar, but the ark of God dwells within tent curtains. So they're meeting in what was the tent of God called? The tabernacle. So it was this tent in which there was the Ark of the Covenant, and it was this cloth tent. And David's looking around at his house and going, this doesn't seem right. I have a really nice new house, a nice palace, and the Ark of the Covenant, which represents our communion with God, is in a tent. So Nathan said to the king, go do all that is in your mind, for the Lord is with you. So Nathan just speaks off the top of his head and goes, I think that's a good idea. You go do you, David. But in the same night, the word of the Lord came to Nathan, saying, go and say to my servant David, thus says the Lord, are you the one who should build me a house to dwell in? For I have not dwelt in a house since the day I brought up the sons of Israel from Egypt. Do you see an important theme over and over and over? I brought you out of Egypt. This is a huge point. For I have not dwelt in that house, even to this day, but I have been moving about in a tent, even in a tabernacle. Wherever I have gone with all the sons of Israel, did I speak a word with one of the tribes of Israel, which I commanded to shepherd my people, saying, why have you not built me a house of cedar? Now therefore, thus you shall say to my servant David, thus says the Lord of hosts, I took you from the pasture, from following the sheep, to be ruler over my people Israel. I have been with you wherever you have gone, and have cut off all your enemies before you, and I will make you a great name, like the names of the great men who are on the earth. I will also appoint a place for my people Israel, and will plant them, that they may live in their own place, and not be disturbed again. Nor will the wicked afflict them any more as formerly, even from the day that I commanded judges to be over my people Israel. And I will give you rest from all your enemies. The Lord also declares to you that the Lord will make a house for you. So he says, no thanks, David. I don't want a house from you, but I'm going to give you a house. What is this house that he's speaking of? Is he speaking of, yeah, your nice cedar house was great, but I'm going to give you one of gold or something like that? No. When your days are complete and you lie down with your fathers, I will raise up your descendant after you, who will come forth from you, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be a father to him, and he will be a son to me. When he commits iniquity, I will correct him with the rod of men and the strokes of the sons of men. But my loving kindness shall not depart from him, as I took it away from Saul, whom I removed from before you. Your house and your kingdom shall endure before me forever. Your throne shall be established forever. In accordance with all these words and all this vision, so Nathan spoke to David. So Nathan originally says, that sounds like a good idea. You go do it. And now he has to come back to David and go, so actually, I had a meeting with the CEO, and we have to change that. I acted a little bit hesitantly there, right? And so God says, no, but I'm going to build you a house, and this is a house that will not end. Now, he contrasts that with whom? The house of whom? Saul. See, Saul was the first king of Israel. And not long after he becomes king, he becomes a jealous, obsessive king, and he disobeys the Lord and leads the nation, starts to lead the nation astray and allowing idolatry. And so God removes the throne from his house and gives it to whom? David. But what is he promising David? I will not do to you what I did to Saul. I will not permanently remove the throne from your lineage. It will be a lineage established forever. So moving on to 2 Chronicles gives a parallel. Then I will establish your royal throne as I covenanted with your father David, saying, you shall not lack a man to be ruler in Israel. We also see chapter 21, verse 7 of 2 Chronicles. Yet the Lord was not willing to destroy the house of David because of the covenant which he had made with David, and since he had promised to give a lamp to him and his sons forever. God comes to David, who had desired to build a temple for God, and denies him that responsibility, and ultimately gives it to whom? Who's the one who ends up building the temple? Solomon, right? However, God makes an unconditional covenant, a royal grant covenant with David, that he would establish his David's name forever, the land of Israel and the house of the throne of David forever. So 2 Samuel chapter 7, 9 through 16, and then we're going to end it with this. I have been with you wherever you have gone, and have cut off all your enemies from before you. And I will make you a great name, like the names of the great men who are on the earth. I will also appoint a place for my people Israel, and will plant them, that they may live in their own place and not be disturbed again. Nor will the wicked afflict them any more as formerly, even from the day that I commanded judges to be over my people Israel, and I will give you rest from all your enemies. Again, the Lord declares to you that the Lord will make a house for you. When your days are complete, I will raise up your descendant after you will come forth. I will establish his kingdom. He will build a house for my name. I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. Okay? So what do we see in this promise? We see God promising David, his line will be the line of the kings of Israel forever. There will never be another line but from the house of David. Now, next week, we're going to look at 3 objections to this. Number one, we find later in Jeremiah that God curses part of David's line. We also asked the question, well, if David's supposed to have a king on the throne forever, who's the king of Israel now? Like, there's not a king on Israel's throne now, so what's going on there? And then we'll answer the question, is this passage referring to Jesus or to a permanent, a purely human king? And the answer is going to be yes. But just bear with me. So we'll look at those three next time, and then we'll look at the new covenant and its relationship to the church. All right? Any questions on the Davidic covenant right now? I told you what those objections are in case those are your questions, so you know I'll get to them next week. But any questions on what we did talk about? This is going to be setting up end time events directly, and the nature of why God does the end time events the way he does it. We're going to see this promise of a descendant of David who will reign, not just reign, but reign as the king of Israel. Okay? This is going to be why the death of Christ is such a big deal, because Jesus, as we're going to ultimately find, is the promised Davidic king that God had said was going to come, and instead of embracing him, what do? They kill him. Okay? So then, in what sense is Jesus reigning as the Davidic king? That's what we're going to have to unpack next time, okay?